Welcome. This is the update to my forecast for solar cycle 25 based on the data as of February 2023. There are many different ways of forecasting a solar cycle. I'm just going to use three very simple ones today. Use past cycle as a template for the rest of the cycle, extrapolate current trends, and to use flares, coronal mass ejections, and active region observations to get some idea of what the cycle might be doing. Now, you won't see this sort of analysis anywhere else on the web because I do all this myself. The one thing I have going for me is that I got the last one right, which none of these other folks can claim. However, all these mathematical algorithms and all the rest of them, including what I'm going to do here today, the best can be said of them that none of them are right. So your guess is going to be as good as mine or theirs. The first question is, are sunspots the key to predicting the solar cycle? Here we have the sunspot number for the last 13 years. As I've shown you this before, yellow is the daily averages, and you can see they bounce all over the place and you can't really conclude very much from those. The blue line is the monthly average ones. They're a little bit calmer, but they still have weird bumps and dips in them that are going to be destructive for future predictions. And then we have what's called the monthly smooth sunspot number. That's the red curve, and that's the one that most people use to do predictions, and also is the parameter that is used to actually determine when solar maximum and solar minimum are. So we have solar cycle 24 here on the left, and the beginnings of solar cycle 25 here on the right. Now I'm going to show you three different models that are used by the Solar Influences Data Center, which is the world's authority on sunspots. This one is called the Kalman optimized filter forecast for the standard curve. And you can see that it's showing a strong upward trend even through the end of 2023 and doesn't show any sign of curving over towards maximum. That one seems the most likely to me, and that predicts a maximum of something like about 170 or higher. The second one is the common model algorithm, and you can see this one is showing signs of turning over. And by the end of 2024, we'll have reached a plateau at about 130. Then there is what's called the McNish and Lincoln method, which shows an upward trend going through the end of the 2024 and continuing upwards. So maximum will be 135 or greater. The mean of these three comes out to be 145. One very popular method of predicting a solar cycle is to compare its progress with previous cycles. This is what I've done here. I've plotted the smooth sunspot number for all 25 cycles. The one in red is solar cycle 25, i.e. the current cycle. And you can see that it's in the 16th position as far as the biggest cycles are concerned. That would put it in a maximum of about 145 to 160. But it is still going up and may well overtake other cycles, so it might yet be higher than that. One way of comparing cycles is to look at the number of sunspot regions that have evolved since the beginning of the cycle. So along the bottom here, I have the number of months since solar minimum for both solar cycles 24 and solar cycles 25. 25 is the red-brown, solar cycle 24 is the dark blue. And you can see that solar cycle 25 has been outperforming solar cycle 24 since almost the very beginning of this cycle. And the other thing to note here is that at the 38th month, solar cycle 24 is beginning to turn over and flatten out, whereas solar cycle 25 seems to be going on strongly. And this is a theme you'll see in other plots that I've got coming up. But if we take the ratio of the number of regions so far, we have an estimated maximum of 134 for the cycle, assuming it follows a similar trend to solar cycle 24. But it looks as though it's going to outclass that. We can also use the number of flares, and I've broken them into three classes, C, M, and X flares. These are the C class flares, which are very numerous, and so the statistics are very good. Once again, you can see solar cycle 24 in blue is beginning to level off, whereas solar cycle 25 is still growing rapidly. And if you take the ratio of these two and multiply that by 116, you get that the peak of this cycle, solar cycle 25, will be about 223. We could do the same sort of analysis for M flares. There are not so many of them, so the statistics aren't quite as good. But once again, you can see solar cycle 24 is leveling off. Solar cycle 25 is still continuing to shoot up. So that implies that this will be an underestimate. But if you take the ratio of these two, it predicts 235 for the peak of solar cycle 25. We've had recently a large number of X flares from solar cycle 25, and so it's jumped out way ahead of solar cycle 24, although that won't last very long into March, I think. Anyway, if you take the ratio as they stand currently, the peak of solar cycle 25, according to the X flare monitor, would be 180. You get a similar number for the coronal mass ejections. If you compare those numbers, again, the coronal mass ejection numbers continue to rise rapidly, and solar cycle 24 numbers are beginning to flatten out. You can do an extrapolation, which is always dangerous because it always assumes that things will continue exactly as they are, and they rarely do. If I take the number of regions that produce sunspots over time and project it forward to the end of 2023, I get an estimate of about 150, and probably going higher than that. I could do the same thing with the NOAA regions, which there's fewer of them, but I get a value there for about 160. What we have here is we're trying to bound the values of the solar cycle, put the upper and lower limits on them and see what the average is. The plot down here is an interesting one in that I've got the number of months since solar minimum as the time axis again, and the probability that maximum will occur during that period. So I've taken all 24 previous solar cycles and plotted where their maxima were, and then run a 13-month smoothing filter over them so we don't get just a lot of jagged points with no meaning. And it seems that the best chance of getting a solar maximum is 44 months after solar minimum. But anyway, the rise to maximum, the shortest that we've ever had, is 35 months. So that would say that the maximum was in December of 2022. So we've already passed maximum according to this, if that was the model. The longest is 82 months. That would put us into October of 2026, which I think is improbable. The last maximum plus the average cycle length would put us into May of 2025, and that's why you see so many estimates for the solar cycles being in 2025. They've just added 11.1 years to the date of the last maximum, which is a sort of a coward's way out. Most probable is at 44 months with an uncertainty of plus or minus 1 month. That would put it in July to September of this year. The range is 40 months to 52 months. That's the most probable ones. That's above 35% probability. That would be April of 2023 to April of 2024. So it says sometime in the next year or so we're going to have maximum, if that's the most probable way that the cycle evolves. So let's take a look at a summary chart of these predictions. My prediction that I've had going since 2019 based on recession to the mean is a 165. I'm staying by that for the moment. The standard curve model was 170. The combined method is 130. And the Nish-Lincoln method is 135. If we compare solar cycles, we are at about 150. If we'd use NOAA sunspot regions, we're 134. C flares, M flares, and X flares give us much higher values at 223, 235, and 180, respectively. Coronal mass ejections also give us a number of 180. And that extrapolation method that I talked about gives us 148 for one and 160 for the other. The average of all of these comes out at 168, which of course is actually very close to the value that I gave originally. And as I say at the very beginning, none of these have any meaning unless by chance one of them happens to tap in to the real solar cycle signal. We will see in a couple of years' time. So what can we conclude from this? All activity indicators are increasing. No sign of solar cycle 25 flattening out. So it's probably going to be a longer cycle than solar cycle 24, and certainly a much more active cycle than solar cycle 24. The most likely maximum will be in August of 2023, but could go on to 2026. The maximum lasts typically about 30 months. That's keeping the intensity of the maximum within 20% of the maximum. The maximum amplitude is averaged out at 168, but could be as low as 130 or as high as 235. And note all of those are higher than solar cycle 24 at 116. So thank you for watching. I'm going to update this every month when I can. And until then, stay safe and goodbye.